moving on to something a lot more sweeter, that's sugar. Even though we're not talking about sugar, but the factory that produces sugar. And the $36.5 million Komenda Sugar Factory is idle. After 5 years of commissioning, this dims Ghana's dreams to produce sugar locally and reduce the importation of the commodity internationally. Now, figures from 2016 show Ghana spends $200 million to produce sugar annually. The unpleasant news is that $200 million to import sugar annually. The story is that the factory that was supposed to produce sugar here in Ghana is rusting away. Machines are corroded and the roofs are torn. The factory, which is just 5 years old, looks almost 20 years old. Jojo Kobna visited the Komenda Sugar Factory and reports that the people are appealing to government to operationalize the factory.
This is the factory that is supposed to be producing sugar for the country, but it has been idle for 5 years. The roof is rusty and worn out. Before we get into the details of the current state of the factory, let's trace how Ghana found itself in this situation. It may sound basic, but Ghana had a dream to start producing sugar locally. Hence the rebirth of the Komenda Sugar Factory. The old factory, built in 1964, became defunct about 30 years ago. A loan of $36.5 million was invested into the factory. Resuming operations at the factory was a perfect opportunity to do things right this time around and cut down on Ghana's importation of sugar.
So as I speak, every single cube of sugar, every single grain of sugar that we eat here in Ghana is imported from outside. Komenda is going to change that. It is my honor and my pleasure to declare the Komenda Sugar Factory duly inaugurated.
Excitement created the commissioning of the sugar factory in 2016.
The inauguration of the Komenda Sugar Factory will provide jobs. It is estimated that in full production, this project will provide direct and indirect jobs to an estimated 7,300 people.
Unfortunately, the facility shut down in July 2016 because of inadequate sugarcane. It was due to reopen in October 2016, but never did to date. Since then, there has been a flurry of promises to get the factory running.
Because somewhere here, into here, Emma factory to me the amount of land we need for the sugar, the type of sugar we can grow here, all those things were not properly organized. I think our organization. Our organization and also the between strategic investor and also it me aba bisomu
But it took 2 years before the government announced a new investor for the sugar factory.
This factory, like any other factory, will keep on needing ongoing investment, ongoing retooling, and if that is done, definitely it will keep running and it will bounce back.
When are you starting work?
We are waiting for the final agreements to happen. After that, we'll start working.
It is past the second week of August, and the Komenda Sugar Factory remains closed. Currently, the facility is in terrible shape. A comparison of the factory in 2016 and 2021 shows the factory is deteriorating. There sits the Komenda Sugar Factory in its rusted glory. It has been abandoned for so many years. It is not producing sugar. And there are so many youth in the community needing jobs, and they have none. The plates and rakes that would carry the sugarcane for crushing have rusted. The new investor would have to spend more money to revive a new factory that was shut down just months after commissioning. A journey to the roof with a drone reveals further deterioration. Parts of the roof are rusted, worn out and torn. The roof is riddled with holes, and with the onset of the rains, it is obvious the rains seep into the factory. A group calling itself Concerned Citizens of Komenda is upset. Their convener, Samuel Awuja, is dismayed.
I quite remember about last 2 years, the Trade Minister, Honorable Ahunkalin, said the traditional area should look for land. We've been able to do that. We've been able to secure about 3,500 acres of land, and that is even far beyond the expected 2,000. So as for the land we already have, it's now left to the government to come and operationalize. So anybody who talks about sugarcane and land issue, it's a non-starter. They shouldn't even go there, because we have land available, and then the sugar plantation was also done. You know, it takes 6 months for the sugarcane to be ripe for the factory. When the government came in, it's been 5 years.
The land reserved for the cultivation of sugarcane around the factory has been left fallow, and along the beaches of Komenda are people yearning to be employed once the factory is reopened. Joseph Shen is unemployed. His friends, who could not stand the pressures of unemployment, have migrated to Accra and other parts of the country, hoping to get non-existent jobs. Sharing their disillusionment and absolute displeasure, the residents pleaded with the president to fulfill his promises.
What no kwisi na sise we yedwuma sugar factory or musu pa dey taxpayers money and abenu akwohwe bo se we baby no da ba the madi so won wie na aben fofo abada no so watu na adwumo dem account na abenda da obo no watu na adwumo ho na adni so na adni rust aben we di ehwemo bebre agofo adu na aben we di ehwemo bebre alba bet na the promise akohwe promise ngotin everybody know the promise I could shoot and say I could find what you remember, especially commander for what you remember. As the Komenda Sugar Factory, about to that man. I beno, what Jim, one cast on crowdy. This I didn't one day say, I ben biba, never I did this one more, yeah, I been for bar. I don't continue, you know what you had no was. This is Ghana, Damano Wabadama, Yadity. A Kawana, this is Ghana. This is Ghana, a bussy I call Bob and Yada by Muntujuma, Yama, before Abama. No swan was sword, the mere may I listen, oh, Yawankasa. On my fix your sugar factory, man. Nay, Rose.
Now we are doubting them so much, and we don't believe them. The fact is that for a first term of office, 4 years, and a second term of office, all this was strategic investor. It has been given to strategic investor. At least, of course, we are young guys here, and such promises have been coming and gone, and we are not seeing anything. So for now, we don't trust them.
Sugarcane farmers are also disappointed. The secretary of the Sugarcane Farmers Association, Aze Kwaku, says his members are now frustrated because they have to give all the harvested sugarcane to Akpatashi distillers at heavily discounted prices. This is because the supply of sugarcane is more than the current demand.
One answer no water. One answer one dozen. Kumebi no water so water on credit basis. Until my pharmacy is covered there also weni. Until oma marketing your correct into wutu I shouldn't to go. Says you no yedi yo pa yes ndi yo ano yiza yidi yo. Or you no yezi in there. It may be any key ha. Na aduma ujuma what day may be see. I can expect it uncle government to obey obotumu abua ma fighting farmer fighting wotu wedimu ma farmers and so you to me yeska.
They have more raw materials than ever anticipated, so they do not pay the farmers on time. Revival of the Komenda Sugar Factory would not affect them in any way. This is because they can always get the molasses from the factory to distill Akpatashi. No crushing of sugarcane, thereby reducing their burden. So even though Akpatashi distillers are benefiting from the abundant supply of sugarcane, they still want government to make the factory operational. The Member of Parliament for the Komenda Edna Iguafo Ibrahim constituency, Samuel Atamils, asked the Trade Minister in Parliament when the factory would be operationalized.
The Ministry of Trade and Industry, working in collaboration with its transaction advisor, PricewaterhouseCoopers Ghana Limited, is in the process of concluding the conditions precedent for the activation of the concession agreement with a selected strategic partner, Park Agrotech Limited, to commence operations at the Komenda Sugar Factory. Government has a right to terminate the agreement. But be that as it may, we are hoping that they will conclude and finalize the fulfillment of these conditions conditions precedent by August this year. And then once that is done, it paved the way for us to require the company to commence activation of the company before the end of the year.
Until the factory becomes functional, it will remain a museum of monumental wastage and failure. Jojo Kobna, JoyNews.
All right, so how do we get the factory back up and running? We'll be speaking shortly with Professor Aaron Tete Asare, Head of Department of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology, School of Biological Science, College of Agriculture and Natural Sciences, University of Cape Coast. So thank you very much. We will be coming to you in a bit, but transaction advisors on the agreement to revamp the Komenda Sugar Factory, PricewaterhouseCoopers, have revealed that the main issue preventing the commencement of work on the project is how to get some tax incentives for the new investor. Here it's Vish Ashagbo, senior partner at PwC, and he spoke on the Super Morning Show earlier today.
When the minister went to Parliament at the end of July, he made reference to the fact that there were some conditions precedent that we needed to work through in order for the effectiveness of the contract. However, in this case, the most significant issue that we are working to deal with is a request from the strategic investor for certain tax incentives. And again, I think the minister put this in the public domain back, I think it was February, when he was going through his vetting. So the issue is that in the early stages of this operation, there will be insufficient raw material locally. So there has to be some provision made for importation of raw sugar into finished product at the factory. What we're working through now is the Tax Incentives Act that will go with the importation of that raw sugar, but also plant and machine and other inputs that will allow the factory to operate effectively. In summary, that is the main issue we're working through so that we can try and reach agreement with the investor and things can take off from there.
All right, so Professor Aaron Tete Asare, you've heard what the transaction advisor has had to say, but for you, I'd want to find out what you feel is the way out. What's your what solutions would you advise?
Yeah, thank you very much, JoyNews TV. I'm happy to be invited for this interaction. Komenda Sugar Factory, as we all know, was commissioned in 2016. And in 2015, as a research scientist, I led a team realizing that there will be a need for planting material. So we initiated a project to look at rapid way of multiplying sugarcane planting material. In fact, the shortfall of the establishment of the sugar factory was because the government did not engage research institutions initially. And so there was no provision made to look at planting material when the factory was commissioned. However, we took it up and then developed sugarcane planting material in vitro in the laboratory, and then established them on the field in order to look out for protocol for rapid multiplication to generate adequate planting material for farmers. Lack of planting material is a key issue right from the onset of commissioning of the factory. So that was done, and in 2017, we had a press conference to showcase, as a university, that it is possible to multiply sugarcane planting material in vitro and then establish them on the field nursery for farmers to assess and to establish sugarcane farms and plantations. And well, usually this went out, but we didn't have government engagement on any front until 2019, when government invited some investors. And so Park Agrotech Ghana Limited, that was mentioned, happened to be one of the contestants. And the manager had then contacted me. We have talked at length, look at the way forward. So the university was strategically positioned to generate planting material, offer technical advice or expertise for generating planting material for farmer access. So this is what we have done, and that's what has been our contribution. But there are political face of this whole factory issue. And since it is a national asset, which is owned by government, it's only government that has the mandate to give direction as to making the factory accessible to the investor and as when. And as is mentioned, there are documentation that has to go through. But I think that things has been so slow. At the time when even the investor was introduced in 2019, we're in 2021. As at that time, even the cost that would have gone into refurbishing the factory was no joke. And up to today, 2 years after down the line, and up to today, we have not been able to establish sugarcane plantations. So we still are around the same point. As a university, we have established a nursery at a cost, our own cost, but still awaiting for government directives and for documentation process to be over so that the investor comes on board and to enable us to carry out multiplication of the planting material. Multiplication of planting material can take us 2 to 3 years before we will be able to adequately generate material for adequate farm establishment. So the way forward is in phases, and government has a key role. If we don't have clear-cut direction, it will be extremely difficult for anybody to execute any plan.
Essentially, you're saying that the University of Cape Coast has positioned itself to support this factory by multiplying the planting materials or having the technology, putting in place the technology that will help multiply the planting materials and make the sugarcane available. But work has to start on it like now.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. Plant has its own lifetime. The sugarcane takes between 10 to the sugarcane plant material that we have 10 to 12 years. 12 months. That is a year before they'll be ready for processing. But then the cane for planting, by 6 to 8 months, they can be harvested and then used to establish the plantations. Right. So in all this, you realize that there's time at every phase. And so when we delay so much, it affects the subsequent progression. So for instance, if by December, before the investor is given authorization to operate, then it means that it's in next year before planting material even in the laboratory could be achieved, before it will go to field. So there are a lot of processes involved and time involved.
So you're also saying that without your options being explored, there's no way that this factory can be up and running or can get the raw materials to produce sugar in the next few years?
Well, the other option is to import the sugarcane juice and then process sugar. But then that will not also meet the expectation or the purpose for establishing the holistic purpose for establishing the sugarcane factory, because one aspect is to create jobs. And if you import the juice and then process, only a few people can be employed. And so our smallholder farmers and the youth who are waiting with expectation would have missed up on the objective for setting up the factory.
All right. So again, let's come back to the options that you're providing to government. You'd want government to approach you, give you some assistance so that you can probably cultivate the sugar cane that you're developing in your labs.
Yes, the point here I'm making is that a sugar factory cannot run all alone by itself or by investor. It needs a research partnership. And this is what the university has been doing. So currently, the University of Cape Coast has a memorandum of understanding with the investor, Park Agrotech Ghana Limited, because we have been part of the process in developing the proposal and defending the proposal itself. So the university played integral role, for which I'm the lead person.
All right.
And so, the whole issue is that when documentation are completed, because nobody can go ahead and do anything. Even the nursery that we have now is at our own cost, and it has a lifespan. So I'm always getting worried, because by the end of this year, the whole material will then run down. If we don't have clear-cut way for Komenda Sugar Factory to expand or to get what you call the material that has been established now, replanted on expanded fields.
All right. Thank you very much.
Then we also need the other aspect. We need a commercial laboratory, tissue culture laboratory, and so you realize that you need time to build, a state-of-the-art tissue culture laboratory purposely for multiplying sugarcane planting material. But without documentation process, the investor will also not be able to, invest anything in that direction, because it's business, and it's business that is governed by government policies, and policies can change. So if we don't have the right policies in place to secure the investor's investment, then there's no way out. You will also, start anything.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Aaron Tete Asare, Head of Department of Molecular Biology and Technology at the University of Cape Coast.